lot of things have been said about regulation, a lot of things have been said about foreign exchange. And my interest in this particular dissertation is the two aspects which Mr. Hegde highlighted, which is on compliance, and the other aspect of putting in place a system whereby if there is non-compliance, how would we manage the non-compliance? Now, this is where comes the piece of legislation called Foreign Exchange Management Act. As you all know, we had the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1973, which was supposed to be a draconian kind of legislation. And people used to fear FERA, not for the act, but for what we used to call as the enforcement directorate. Because it was, any violation under the FERA regime was a criminal offense. And there was a paradigm shift when FEMA was passed in the year 2000. And any violation or any contravention became a civil law. This is one very important departure in the regulation of the foreign exchange transactions that took place. Now, there are a lot of things that happened in FEMA. I wouldn't go into that because I have got about 15 slides and I don't think I would be able to go through all the 15 slides in this short period of time. What I would do is I would restrict my talk only to the compliance aspect under FEMA. And what happens if somebody doesn't comply? The user of foreign exchange doesn't comply with the regulations that are there. What happens to the non-compliance aspect of FEMA? I would restrict myself to that. So to begin with, as far as FEMA is concerned, compliance means compliance with the rules, notifications, regulations, or directions issued under the Act. FEMA section 11 very clearly says there are 3 stages of compliance. It is before undertaking a particular foreign exchange transaction, one should see that one complies with all the regulations that are in place. And while undertaking a foreign exchange transaction, one should be very careful to see that one doesn't contravene any of the regulations or the acts or the notifications issued by the Government of India or whatever is contained in the Foreign Exchange Management Act itself. And the last important thing is, after undertaking a transaction, there are certain regulatory filings which need to be done by the undertaker of the foreign exchange transaction. And there also compliance plays a very important role. So these are the 3 aspects which the Act itself very clearly says that compliance is what is very, very important in these 3 things. The important aspect of FEMA is that, which is a departure from the earlier FERA Act of 1973, is that FEMA very clearly defines what a current account transaction is and what a capital account transaction is. It's for the first time there is a clear demarcation of what a current account transaction is and what a capital account transaction is. If you look at the Act, it does not define current account. It only says transactions which are in the nature of, let's say, interest payment or a dividend payment or payment for import or export, students going abroad, all these come under the current account category. Whereas capital account is something which the Act goes to define and says that anything which affects the assets and liabilities of a person resident in India or his holdings abroad, or the assets and liabilities of the person who is undertaking a transaction in the Indian books for a resident will be treated as a capital account. And in the Foreign Exchange Management Act, there is clear segregation of responsibilities as far as the current and the capital accounts are concerned. Compounding has not been defined in the Act. If you look at the Act, FEMA, compounding has not been defined anywhere in the Act. But compounding normally is what this means. That is, to settle an offence committed by the contravenor through imposition of a monetary penalty without going in for litigation, which is very, very important because FEMA ensures that there is no litigation at all as far as the violation is concerned. And after the contravenor voluntarily acknowledges having committed the contravention. This is very, very important in the concept of, in the context of compounding. that the contravener has to voluntarily come forward and say that he has or she has contravened a particular regulation, and hence he is submitting suo motu for regularizing the transaction through the process of compounding. Clearly defines the contraventions and the penalties that are leviable under the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Section 13 talks about adjudication and penalties. Section 14 is the enforcement of the order of the adjudication authority, which is normally the Directorate of Enforcement. And what today for our talk is relevant is Section 15, which is a domain which is administered by the Reserve Bank of India through a process called the compounding process. Now, there is what is called the Foreign Exchange Compounding Proceedings Rules of 2000. Under that, I have taken about 4 rules which are very, very important from a practical point of view. And these are given here. Once the compounding process has been completed, there is no inquiry at all by anybody after the compounding process is complete. There is opportunity of hearing by the compounding authority, CA is compounding authority, and disposal of application and the compounding process will have to happen in 180 days. From the time a contravener makes an application, either suo motu or through coming to know about the contravention, within 180 days the compounding process has to be completed, and the compounding the transaction needs to be regularized. And some compounded, the penalty that is imposed will have to be paid within 15 days. In case the penalty is not paid, we normally don't refer to this as penalty, we call it compounding fee. If the compounding fee is not paid at all, then it is treated as if the particular transaction has not been subjected to compounding. And the only remedy that the Reserve Bank will have is to refer the transaction to the Directorate of Enforcement. So compounding is a very, very transparent process. It benefits the contravener operates because there is a time line prescribed for deciding the application is received at the Reserve Bank of India along with the fees, which is 5,000 rupees along with the application, and the 5,000 rupees that is paid along with the application is the money that is used for administering or scrutinizing the application for administrative expenses of the Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank may call for additional information if required. There is an opportunity given to the contravener to come for a personal hearing with the compounding authority and probably explain to him what led to the contravention, or whether the contravention happened because he was not aware of the regulations. He can come and explain. And after the hearing takes place, the compounding authority takes into account the circumstances under which a particular transaction has been contravened or violated, and he would pass a compounding order. After the compounding order has been passed, within 15 days, the contravener needs to pay the compounding fee. Once the compounding fee is paid, the Reserve Bank of India will issue a certificate for payment of the penalty or the compounding fee. And with that, the transaction is closed with the Reserve Bank of India and the compounding process comes to a close. Now, this is a very important thing because it is not left to the contravener to decide whether a contravention is a technical contravention or a minor contravention. It is something to be decided by the Reserve Bank of India. If the Reserve Bank of India decides that a particular contravention is minor or technical, probably they would let off the contravener by issuing a cautionary advice. But the prerogative to decide whether it is a technical contravention or a minor contravention is with the Reserve Bank of India and not with the contravener. Related to this particular aspect is that if a contravener, without knowing whether it could be minor or technical, if he makes a suo motu application to the Reserve Bank of India, And if the application comes to the Reserve Bank of India, and if Reserve Bank finds that it could be a minor or a technical contravention, Reserve Bank will not issue a cautionary advice because the contravener has already made an application suo motu under the Act, and hence the application has to be compounded. The difference is, if Reserve Bank finds that there is a transaction, or if the contravener comes to know through, let us say, other sources, either from the company secretary or from the chartered accountant, that there could be a problem with a particular transaction, the contravener probably could write to the Reserve Bank of India to find out whether this violation needs to be compounded. At that stage, the contravener doesn't make an application under compounding. He just makes a reference to the Reserve Bank of India to find out whether the contravention or the breach is a minor breach or a technical breach or a major breach which needs to be compounded. If the Reserve Bank decides that this is a minor breach, it would issue a cautionary advice and forget about it. Instead of making a reference to the Reserve Bank of India to find out about the nature of the contravention, if the contravener makes an application, there is a prescribed application for compounding. If the contravener makes an application to the Reserve Bank of India in the prescribed form for by reporting the transaction, then it would be taken as if the contravener has approached the Reserve Bank of India suo motu for compounding the contravention, and Reserve Bank would compound the transaction. It is not contravention which is done with a view to cheating or with a view to committing fraud. It's a contravention which has happened during the course of business. Maybe because the regulations are not clear, maybe because the contravener hasn't understood what it means, or maybe because he has done it without knowing the pros and cons of what he has done. So, to that extent, it provides a resolution mechanism for the persons using foreign exchange. So it provides a lot of comfort to the citizens, and the transaction cost is minimum. All you need to pay is only about 5,000 rupees as application money. And recently, thanks to Mr. Padmanabhan, he was also heading the foreign exchange department, and we have recently come out on 26th of May 2016 with a circular which codifies, which gives examples of the various contraventions that normally happen. These contraventions are basically reporting contraventions. Those who have done foreign direct investment would know that within 30 days of receiving the inward remittance, you need to file a report to the Reserve Bank of India in Section 9.8. And after filing the return, then within 180 days, you need to issue the share certificate. You need to file what is called the FCTPR, and so on and so forth. There are so many things. So, if the reporting contraventions, we found over a period of time that the compounding authorities take different views on the amount of compounding fee to be levied for a similar kind of a contravention. Maybe the amount is different, but it's basically a reporting contravention that has happened. And most of the cases, if you look at the contraventions, they all have happened in the foreign direct investment or in the transfer of shares case. And most of these contraventions are reporting contraventions. So for reporting contraventions, we have codified the amount of compounding fee that could be levied, and depending upon the amount involved, depending upon the period involved, and depending upon the companies, the background of the companies, and so on and so forth. And similarly, we have codified the compounding fee for various contraventions, for external commercial borrowing, for overseas direct investment, for any reporting misdemeanor by the corporates. So all that has been codified very clearly in the 26th May 2016 circular, and it also contains 2 annexures which give examples of how to work out the compounding fee. So if a corporate or if a person using foreign exchange contravenes any of the provisions relating to reporting or any of the other provisions relating to external debt or overseas direct investment or any aspect of foreign exchange, would be able to find out what would be the amount of money that he needs to pay if he goes for compounding with the Reserve Bank of India. And it's become very simple and hassle-free. It has become very simple and hassle-free. Says that the compounding orders will be made public. And I do not know how many of you have seen it in the website. It lists out all the compounding orders that have been issued since June onwards. It contains all the so it only goes to improve the corporate governance, because anybody who has contravened would now expose himself to the entire world, saying that he has contravened and he has been compounded, he has paid so much of fee, etc., etc. So from that point of view, it becomes very important that the compliance aspect under the FEMA is taken care of by anybody using